Hello and welcome to my Yugioh channel. Please make sure to like the video if you enjoy the content and don't forget to subscribe. So today we have got the release of the September 14th, 2020 limited and forbidden list for the Yugioh trading card game. So this is the European and American version of the game. And again, this will be effective as of the 14th of September, so that will be Monday coming. And they've specified that this will not be changed until at least December 14th for a new ban list. And in terms of the forbidden list, we've got Block Dragon. Lots of people understand why Block Dragon is on the ban list. Its ability to kind of summon other cards, to pitch itself, and to be used within so many of these rock style decks. Means that it has needed to be banned. It's incredibly powerful. It could be used for Xyz summoning, and it's generally, too powerful to keep in the game. Jet Synchron, I can understand as well. It's one of the key components to many of the Synchro decks, being able to kind of revive itself from the graveyard to the field and to go into various other Synchro monsters. Means that that's why it's seeing banning, especially with the new master rule, meaning that you no longer can only limit yourself to having one synchro monster on the field. You can actually now go into multiple without needing to have link points and link zones, as was the previous series for the link frames and everything to do with that. As for Mecha Phantom Beast O'Lion, this card is used to bring out lots of different tokens and can be used to go into... there's a Link monster that's a Mecha Phantom Beast. I'm not sure of its name, but it's considered one of the biggest issues to do with the game, and actually means that you can go into Link spamming much easier. That's kind of why that's on the ban list as well. None of those are particularly a surprise to me. I don't think many people will kind of miss them unless they're maybe a bit degenerate and actually like playing these styles of cards. I'm glad to see that they're on the forbidden list. I don't think they'll be on there forever, but certain cards, definitely Block Dragon, will be on there at least until the next ban list, more than the next ban list, It's just too powerful a card. Now, I wasn't sure, as for the limited cards, what a couple of these cards do. I'm not too familiar with some of these cards, but that's just how it is. With Double Iris Magician, the Pendulum effect is once per turn you can target one Dark Spellcaster type monster you control, apply this effect to it, and then destroy this card. Once applied, double any battle damage that monster inflicts to your opponent this turn if it battles an opponent's monster. That's not a big deal, even in things like Dark Magician decks. It's really not going to, come down to much. It won't be a game decider. It won't make sure that you win. It's just a nice little effect on it. I think the reason it's in the limited list is to do with when it's destroyed by battle or card effect. You can add one Pendulum Graph card from your deck to your hand. I think these cards are often how the Pendulum decks rely on, and this is to do with being able to search out for other cards and kind of finish off the pieces necessary to bring out those extra monsters, especially things like Zark, which is a concern. It's also considered one of the Pendulum Dragon cards, so this is also a key way of bringing Zark out to begin with. As for the Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche, this card is able to send a Phantom Knights monster from your deck to the graveyard in order to set one of your Phantom Knights spell or trap cards directly from your deck into your spell and trap zone. This is concerning because I think it's the there's a Blade card which is able to kind of stop attacks and to negate their effects. That's why this card is limited, especially considering that some of the Phantom Knights cards rely on being sent to the graveyard in order to do anything. The other problem is, of course, whenever a Dark Exceeds monster is special summoned to a zone this card points to, which it will do potentially twice, you can destroy one card on the field. This provides you with too much advantage, and I can see why it's been limited. Called by the Grave is going to be a definite concern for a lot of people for a few reasons. Firstly, this card is a counter to many of the hand traps that you have. You've got your Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit and the various iterations of that, which are able to use their effects to disrupt your plays. You've got Effect Veiler, you've got various other effects which this card can counter. I don't necessarily see this as a good thing, because that might just encourage people to run more hand traps. It's very concerning to what they can do, and there are very limited options you have outside of a card like this. For those of you who have got multiple of this card, I won't be surprised when the market reacts, or, well, it probably already has reacted, and the price of this card decreases massively. I know it was going for ridiculous amounts of money, and I can definitely see why its limitations mean that potentially you might not be running it, because chances of drawing it within an opening hand are, well, 1 in 35, assuming for whatever you draw. So the next card, and this was a little bit of a surprise for me, is Harpy's Feather Duster. This, for anyone who doesn't know, this is like an original Yu-Gi-Oh card. It's like Heavy Storm, but it only affects your opponent's spell and trap cards. This has been off the forbidden list for the OCG for at least 1 or 2 ban lists, but it's been on the TCG ban list for basically ever. It's barely seen any appearance. It's been restricted completely, and it's been things similar to things like Raigeki and Dark Hole. I think they're doing this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the OCG has theirs, so it's not necessarily fair to just outright remove our ability to use it. At least putting it to 1 means you might not be kind of abusing it as much as you could do. A secondary thing is, lots of players don't actually rely on spell and traps that often unless they're archetype based, which means they don't have to bother too much or are incentivized to use this card. The other thing as well is there are cards that can just out this, negate it, and deal with it much easier. People don't really run things like Curse Seal of the Forbidden Spell. I know that was kind of a tech option for a certain couple of cards, and also things like Magic Drain. But there are now more counters for it. I just don't see it, even though it's great that it's off the forbidden list, I don't see it coming, instantly everyone charging around, oh, I've got Harpy's Feather Duster back. It's just not going to happen. I just know it. So the next cards we have are the semi-limited list. So these are cards you can run 2 of. The first card is Seer Malebranche of the Burning Abyss. I'm not quite sure why the Burning Abyss cards were banned or reduced in usage for now. I think there was a deck called PK Fire which combined the Phantom Knights with the Burning Abyss, which is the reason why they got banned. I think there were too much synergy, but actually I don't see even bringing them back to full strength will necessarily mean people will be running these. Its basic effect is if you control no spell or trap cards, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 Burning Abyss monster in your graveyard, except a copy of itself, and special summon it. This was used just to go into your rank 3 monster, which was Dante. And obviously, the whole thing was some of these cards you could rank up, or I think there was a fusion as well. I think the rank up was like Beatrice you've got, but I don't see the value in kind of not having these cards back. And the same I'd apply with something like Graf Malebranche of the Burning Abyss, because they essentially just have the same effects. and the only difference is that the stat lineup is a little different. It's good for anyone who likes playing Burning Abyss, but for me, I wasn't very interested in the archetype. I'm not particularly sure how it works. I know they have a few boss monsters, but they're not particularly that great anymore, especially as the timeline for them was like the Xyz generation. Now, as for the other two cards, I do care about these cards, and I'm very concerned that they're being brought out. For anyone who isn't aware, ABC Dragon Buster is a nightmare to deal with. I would compare it a little bit to Cyber Dragon Infinity, because just getting rid of it, just getting rid of one, takes a lot of your resources, unless you're running kaijus. So just getting rid of it is enough of a problem, and it being a 3000 attack monster makes it worse. It actually makes it worse. It means it's so difficult to remove. It requires 3 cards. It needs A Assault Core, B Buster Drake, and C Crush Wyvern in order to summon. And it's similar to those of the XYZ Dragon Catapult Cannon cards, whatever you want to call them. You know, the ones that were used by both Seto Kaiba and Chaz Princeton, where you actually just banish the cards you control either for... but the difference is actually this is both from the graveyard and the field, so you can bring this card out. You know, you can just pitch those cards very easily and get this card out very simply. Its effect is a quick effect as well, which means it can just banish cards your opponent has. This disruption means unless you're running multiple negations or ways of, you know, extending your combos, that one banish on your turn can be enough to stall you to the point where your opponent is just too close to victory and you just instantly lose to it. The other problem is it can actually switch itself out for the for 3 Light Machine Union monsters with different names. Do you know what's funny about that? All 3 cards listed in its summoning are for those cards. They're all of the requirements needed. So you can just, if your opponent tries to use something like Raigeki on this card, then they can just swap this out for the 3 cards, block your attacks for the turn, and then go back into this again. And obviously having multiple of these cards means that you can recover them and switch them out. That's why I think this bringing it to 2 is a nightmare. I can see this style of deck coming back too quickly. Now here is the ultimate nightmare. Totally awesome. So this card is able to be summoned by just simply 2 level 2 Aqua type monsters. The reason I'm concerned for this is there's a couple of reasons. Firstly, if you're not aware, Konami is running that Twitter contest at the moment where you can vote for archetype-based support. It's like a bracketed system where it's something versus something. And recently, the Frog archetype beat its competitive archetype, which means it's that closer to getting more support, which, trust me, it doesn't need. Being able to actually special summon a frog monster means that you could potentially go into 2 of these within the same turn if you want. And actually, you can negate the activation of various effects, whether that be your opponent's spell, trap, or monster effects, and essentially just take their card to use for yourself. That is the ultimate injustice, and it's a nightmare to counter. The problem with having 2 of them is, of course, at least with one, you know, your opponent isn't going to be incentivized to use this too much. But with 2, that means they can actually just, you know, they can recover this card. They can do what they want. I mean, things like Pot of Avarice exist. So you can always just see this as a bit of a nightmare. I just don't see why they've done this, but, you know, that's Konami's decision. And what they say goes, apparently. Okay, for the unlimited list, Makira the Disruptor. So unlimited means you can run a full playset. If you want 3, you can have 3. That's not an issue. This is very much you can activate and recover trap cards. It's not effective. People really don't play that many traps. The favourability of traps tends to be if you can use them from the hand, such as Red Reboot or Infinite Impermanence. Being able to deal with things like that is not an issue. Tour Guide from the Underworld, I think, is an interesting option. Of course, it can summon itself, plus special summon a level 3 Dark Fiend monster. I think that's what it does. So you can go into rank 3 Xyz monsters more easily. Of course, this was paired with things like Sangan, because when Sangan went to the graveyard, it had an effect where you could then search for a card to add to your hand. It's not that popular now, and I don't see putting it at 3 is going to make that much difference. If anything, it makes your deck a lot more cloggy. Though saying that, we do now have the new Chaos cards, which might see a lot more interest, especially with this card. The next card, Evagishki Gust Kraken, I actually had to search this up because I was not aware of what this is. I know what Evagishkis are. I know it's a ritual-based deck, and that's kind of their boss monsters, so this is one of them. It's a 2,400 attack monster. It's a level 6, and its effect means that your opponent can look at 2 random cards in your opponent's hand, and then shuffle one of them into the deck. The good thing about this is it's not that they can see your entire hand, because hand knowledge is very important. If you know what your opponent is playing and you have an understanding of how that deck kind of likes to play, you're able to counter it a lot easier. But only being able to select 2 cards, you might hit 2 random cards, 2 generic cards which people are running, so things like Effect Veiler, maybe another hand trap in there, means you're not given any information at all, and shuffling one of them might not make a blind bit of difference. Saying that, if you're able to get several of these cards out, that could be quite dangerous. If you can do that, that's what makes this card a massive threat. But the whole point is you're going to have to find ways of getting rid of ritual cards. Out of rituals, they've gotten a lot more support, and it'd be interesting to see if these get any hints in the future. But I don't think at the moment it's going to make that big of a difference. This one actually gave me a bit of a shock as well. Pantheism of the Monarchs. It's a great support card for the Monarch archetype. Initially, the Monarchs were pretty much just individual monsters that just made an archetype. They had their different attributes, but you summon them, they got their effect, and that was it. There wasn't really anything you could do with them. Most of them didn't rely on special summoning, so you had to normal summon to get their effects. However, you had things like Kuraz and various other newer ones who could have a special summon effect if they wanted to, which made this a little bit more viable and actually connected the deck a lot better. This card is really necessary for the deck, and actually having 3 of them makes it a lot more consistent. I would see people running this again, because this pretty much puts them, I would have to say, at full power. For anyone who doesn't know what this card does, you send one of your Monarch spell or traps from your hand to the graveyard, and then you draw 2 cards. So it's neither a plus or a minus, because what you're doing is you're just replacing that card and this card. But you're able to banish this card from your graveyard to also reveal 3 Monarch spell trap cards from your deck, and then your opponent chooses one for you to add to your hand, and then you shuffle the rest back. Being able to do this means you're actually able to not only draw into the cards you need, but you're able to get rid of the cards you don't. And in doing this, this kind of adds to the consistency. Monarchs have an issue with that, because if you run too many of the big boss monsters, you're not able to summon them, or if you summon them, you can't get their effects off. So this is kind of necessary for them. I wouldn't really see that as being any downside to this effect. The final card is Sky Striker Mecha Widow Anchor. This card is a nightmare to deal with, and actually a lot of people will probably hate out of the options here. for it to be completely unlimited. I think it was fine where it was in the limited section, but that's my opinion. This card essentially negates one of your opponent's effect monsters, and if you have 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard, you can steal that monster. You can essentially use that card for an Exceed summon, a Tribute summon, a Link summon, or Synchro material if you want to. There are no limitations to what you can do. This makes it quite unique because many cards with a Snatch Steal based effect let you steal that card but have restrictions on them, whether that be you can only summon monsters of this attribute, this type, this archetype, or have limitations where whatever you bring out from it is then negated as well. So this is one of those less limiting cards. Of course, it's meant as a disruptor, and I think this is probably a massive mistake on Konami's part. So what do you think of these cards? Is there anything you were quite shocked to see? Is there anything you like that has been unlimited or has at least gone to a less restricted section? Or are you quite surprised at the decisions that Konami has made? Whatever you think, leave your comments down below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe.